Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Fenway Park.
Welcome to Monster Territory, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you all had a great weekend. How about that World Series? One of the best Game 7s of all time. In the end, the Dodgers found a way to win back-to-back World Series, but you got to tip the cap to the Toronto Blue Jays, man. Incredible performance from them. They took an extremely talented Dodgers team all the way down to the wire. They were 3 outs away from winning that World Series, but in the end, the Dodgers came up big. Incredible Game 7. Again, tip of the cap to the Blue Jays, but we got to move forward here. It's officially the offseason. I love the offseason, man, and I'm hoping for a big one from the Red Sox this year. We'll see what ends up happening, but we got a few things to talk about in this episode tonight. I'm going to be reacting to some predictions out there. We got some friendly friends over at Mass Live that came out with their predictions today. I'm going to give you my thoughts on those, and we do have some news when it came to a couple of guys with some opt-outs. Shocker, Alex Bregman opting out of his contract, Lucas Giolito declining his mutual option. He's a free agent. I'll give you my thoughts on that. And we're also going to be diving in here to some awards. We had a couple of Gold Glove winners this past weekend. I think you already know who they are. And we got a couple of finalists as well when it comes to the Cy Young. I think you already know who that is. And Rookie of the Year. I think you know who that is too, but I'll give you my thoughts on that in just a little bit. But everybody, before I get started here, if you can, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new. Let's get to it here. But before I get to those news, though, I do want to go over some key off-season dates to be aware of. So let's go take a look at those, shall we? So obviously today, it's the first day of the off-season. That's why you're seeing all of these opt-outs left and right. Players can become free agents as of today. Later this week, it is going to be the deadline to tender qualifying offers. Now, the qualifying offer for this coming off-season is $22 million, something to be aware of as well. Next week, you're going to be having the general managers meetings out in Las Vegas from the 10th through the 13th. Now, with those meetings, that's more so, trying to get a feel for the market. You're not really seeing a whole lot of moves in the general managers meetings. You have seen a couple in the past, but not really the place where you're going to see any blockbusters by any means. You got the owners meetings in a couple of weeks. November 18th is the deadline for players to accept qualifying offers. So I wonder if Lucas Giolito could get a qualifying offer. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. November 21st, the deadline to tender all unsigned players, including those arbitration eligible. So the big name for the Red Sox, you're looking at Nathaniel Lowe, projected arbitration salary around $13 million for next year. I imagine they're not going to tender that. So that's something to be aware of. You got some other guys, maybe Tanner Houck possibly. I wonder if Cutter Crawford could be in that mix. Probably not, but I don't know. You got a few guys that are arbitration eligible that maybe could be on that list. We'll just have to wait and see about that. And the big one, the biggest week of the offseason, the winter meetings from December 8th through the 11th. Those are in Orlando. And spoiler alert, I am going to be at the winter meetings this year. I'm going to be trying to get all the juicy gossip that I can. I'm going to be trying to find all the scoopy scoops that I can. So definitely stay tuned for that. You got the draft lottery December 9th. That's during the winter meetings. You have the Rule 5 draft on December 10th. December 15th, the 2025 international signing period ends. January 8th, that's when arbitration eligible players and teams can start to exchange figures. And this is always an interesting time because teams don't want to go to an arbitration hearing. You never want to do that because when you go to a hearing, that's when you have a third party sitting with you and you have to explain to them why you shouldn't be paying this player more money. And that's where you can hurt feelings. You just never want to go there, right? So that's always an interesting time. And January 15th, I think one of the more underrated times of the year, that's when the next international signing period begins. So you're going to be having a lot of young names coming out of the Dominican Republic, out of Venezuela, and the Red Sox are usually active in that market. So excited to see how that goes. Now, let's move on here to the news. Let's move on to the news. And Alex Bregman, Lucas Giolito going into free agency. Not a big surprise, but, I'll say this. Remember, there were people out there when Bregman first signed that contract with the Red Sox. People out there were saying, oh, there's no way he's going to opt out of that contract. $40 million. Why would he turn that down? So don't forget, people were saying that. And listen, I've been saying from the get-go, I think he would opt out because Alex Bregman is one of the better players in baseball for a while. He wants a long-term offer. He wants that long-term security. So last offseason, he didn't quite get the money that he was looking for. So he said, all right, you know what? I'll take the short-term deal with the $40 million per year with deferred money, of course. And he said, all right, well, we'll try again next year. So not surprised about this at all. You all know how I feel about Alex Bregman. I've been saying this from the get-go. I do think in the end he finds a way to come back to the Red Sox. I just don't think his market is really all that great. I mean, sure, there are other teams out there on paper that he would fit with, right? I mean, you look at some teams, kind of similar teams that we saw last offseason. The Tigers, I wouldn't be surprised to see them kick the tires again. The Mariners, they have an opening at third base. The Phillies, maybe they could shake some things up there. Alec Bohm, maybe you can trade him, whatever it may be. We'll talk about Bregman here in a little bit, but I just think in the end, the best fit is with the Red Sox. I think they eventually come to terms on a new contract that makes sense for both sides. And Lucas Giolito declining his part of the mutual option. You don't usually see mutual options get exercised. Very rare. I believe it's under... I know it's under 20 going back over the last, 20 or so years, maybe even less than that, under 15 or 10 possibly. I have to go look, but not very many have been exercised. So I'm not surprised about this at all. And with Giolito, the one thing people are wondering about is, are the Red Sox going to offer him the qualifying offer right around $22 million? So with Giolito, the mutual option was under $20 million, I believe, 18, 19 million. So he's going to see if he can get that qualifying offer. That's what I think. The question is, will the Red Sox offer him it? And I've seen people make the argument, well, okay, they gave Nick Pivetta the qualifying offer last year. Why wouldn't they do that with Giolito? He was solid this year. ERA at a 3.41. But the metrics, that's something you have to pay attention to here. And that's a big difference between him and Nick Pivetta. Now, the FIP was at a 4.17. So if you take a look here, the walk rate was fine, right around 3.5. The home run rate was very good, a home run per 9. But the strikeouts, 7.5 per 9. That's not a whole lot. So the difference with Pivetta, when he was with the Red Sox, as you can see here, he was still getting a good amount of strikeouts. He was limiting the walks. The one problem that he was having was giving up a lot of home runs. So that's why the Padres ended up being a great fit. They got a pitcher-friendly park out there. So they said, hey, we'll take those strikeouts and the walks, and those home runs are definitely going to go down here in San Diego. So Nick Pivetta, because of the strikeouts and the walks, ended up getting himself a solid contract and turned down the qualifying offer. So the Red Sox, they were smart on that end for offering him the qualifying offer. So they thought, hey, you know what? He's got the strikeouts and the walks. We think he's going to decline that, and then we'll get a draft pick for it. So that ended up being very smart from the Red Sox point of view. But for Giolito, I don't know if the Red Sox offer him it, because when you take a look at the metrics here, he doesn't get a lot of swing and miss. He doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. Like I said, the walks weren't bad, but they weren't great either. He was in the 30th percentile. So that's the big difference with Giolito Pivetta. Pivetta had better metrics. Giolito, not so much. Was he solid this year for the Red Sox? Did he get the job done? Yes, but moving forward, is he still going to have that same success? I don't know. Usually when the strikeout numbers are pretty low, along with walking guys as well, you tend to see regression. So I wonder if the Red Sox think, you know what, they've probably gotten the most they can out of Giolito, and I think he probably ends up moving on. I don't see the Red Sox offering him the qualifying offer. That's just my opinion. You never know. Maybe the Red Sox feel like they can get him to another level. Obviously, things worked out this year. We'll see. My guess is they're not going to offer him the qualifying offer. But there's also the fact, too, they have a lot of pitching in the fold. It's funny saying that because just a couple of years ago, it felt like the Red Sox had no pitching, but they've really developed some guys over the last couple of years. Peyton Tolley, Connolly Early, showing some things this past year. Don't forget, Cutter Crawford, he's going to be coming back in 2026. Patrick Sandoval, don't forget about him. They signed him to a 2-year deal last offseason. They were thinking he would make his way back here at some point in 2025. So I imagine he is going to be a part of the mix in some way, shape, or form here in 2026. So you got some other guy, Luis Perales, he's in fall ball right now. That stuff is looking very good. So you have options here. Go even further than that. Taking a look here, Kyle Harrison, don't forget about him. They brought him back in the Rafi Devers trade. Richard Fitz had some issues this year with the arm. Hunter Dobbins had the injury, but those guys figure to work back at some point in 2026. So you got guys, and I just think at this point you got too many. So Giolito, I think, sure, solid year from him this year, but I just think there's too much going on. So I don't think he's going to get the qualifying offer. That's just my opinion, though. Let me know what you think down below in the comments here. So, moving on here. We got some awards to talk about, and we got some finalists for Cy Young and Rookie of the Year. Let's pull this up here. And listen, not surprised about the Gold Glove winners from this past weekend. Wilyer Abreu, Cedar Rafaela. No question to me. Glad they voted correctly here. I was afraid they were going to give the Gold Glove, to Julio Rodriguez out there. Julio Rodriguez, he is one of the young stars of the game. Go back to the All-Star game. A lot of people were, saying, hey, Seti probably should have gone to the All-Star game over J-Rod because the numbers were looking better with Seti at that time. Sure, J-Rod ended up heating up in the second half, and Seti took a bit of a step back with the bat in the second half, came up with a couple of clutch hits, but that was making me a little weary because Major League Baseball, they're trying to promote that guy, right? But the voters, they got this correct with both Cedar Rafaela and Wilyer Abreu. Now, Seti, according to Fangraphs, he was the best defensive center fielder in all of Major League Baseball this year, even ahead of Pete Crow Armstrong. Wasn't even close, in my opinion. And then Wilyer Abreu, he was considered the best defensive right fielder by Fangraphs in all of Major League Baseball. He was a little ahead of Fernando Tatis Jr. Now, Tatis, he put up great numbers defensively as well, but Wilyer, he did it in a smaller sample. So I think Wilyer, man, this guy was phenomenal this year. 15 defensive runs saved, 8 outs above average, and 8 fielding run value. Phenomenal year defensively for Wilyer Abreu. Now, when it comes to the finalists for these upcoming awards, we're looking at Cy Young and Rookie of the Year. And I hate to say this, ladies and gentlemen, I would love to say that Garrett Crochet is going to win the award for the American League. I just don't see him beating Tarek Skubal. Skubal was absolutely insane this past year. Had the better ERA overall. Had a good amount of strikeouts just like Crochet. Crochet was phenomenal. The one problem is he had Tarek Skubal in front of him, right? If you were to give a grade to Crochet, you're looking at an A++. Tarek Skubal was an A+++++. So it's unfortunate. I don't think Crochet is going to win this. He absolutely will get votes, especially for second place votes, but this is going to be Skubal's award. And when it comes to Rookie of the Year, listen, I would love to say Roman Anthony. The guy looked phenomenal, but Nick Kurtz, man, this guy was out of his freaking mind this past year. Holy cow, Nick Kurtz. This guy just put up phenomenal numbers. I mean, let's go take a look at these numbers here, shall we? I mean, look at these numbers here. 117 games. He put up a 4.6 F4 in his rookie year. He hit 290, a 383 on base, a 619 slugging, 36 home runs, a 170 WRC plus. When he got drafted, he was one of the guys I was looking at saying, I think he could be one of the best players coming out of this draft. The guy was phenomenal at Wake Forest. He was an absolute monster in the box. I was all over Nick Kurtz coming out of that draft, and here he is, just a monster this year. Now, with Roman, hey, listen, great numbers from Roman this past year. But we all know, ended up missing the final month of the season, so that definitely hurt him in the end. The numbers were great. Hit 292, 396 on base, 463 on the slugging, a 140 WRC plus. But the power from Kurtz, the fact that Kurtz played more games as well, there's no way Roman's going to win this award. But glad that we got a couple of gold gloves. Let's see. if Crochet can go win that Cy Young next year. Let's go see if Roman Anthony can win the MVP next year. I think Roman Anthony would like an MVP over Rookie of the Year. We'll just wait and see. Now, moving on here. We got some predictions to go look at. So I've come out with my predictions here over the last week or so. I've come up with my Red Sox predictions here on this channel, but I also just came out with my free agent predictions on my main channel on YouTube. That's an annual video of mine. I always have a lot of fun with that. All the subscribers on that channel, we love diving into the free agent predictions. They're all probably going to be wrong, but I did add one prediction to that. Now, I'll get to that in just a little bit, but before I go further, we do have a word from today's sponsor. I'll be right back.
FT fam, if you want more information about Superpower, I have real-life customer Eric Kratz with us right now to explain how you're basically getting the pro experience available for everyone.
$199 is the price, and that's a discount from Superpower. That's a discount from everywhere. You get so much information from your lab test results. Christmas is coming up here soon. You can give this gift to somebody else. Health is the gift that keeps on giving.
Your blueprint activated with Superpower. Not only did Superpower reduce that price to what Kratz is talking about, just $199, but for a limited time, FT fam gets an additional $20 off with code TAKE20. Head to superpower.com and use code TAKE20 at checkout for $20 off your membership. After you sign up, they're going to ask you how you heard about them, and make sure you mention FT to support the show. Stop only reacting to health problems and start proactively improving your health based on real personalized data with Superpower.
Alrighty, let's get back to it here. Let's go take a look at the Mass Live predictions. Our friendly friends over at Mass Live, they put out their predictions this past weekend. You got Chris Cotillo, you got Sean McAdam, you got Christopher Smith putting out some stuff. It's always fun to read this. So here we go. Let's dive into this, shall we? Let's dive into this. We're going to go through this pretty quickly. Number one, the most expensive free agent the Red Sox will sign this winter is, Chris Cotillo thinks, Kyle Schwarber. Now, here's the thing with Kyle Schwarber, right? I would love for the Red Sox to go bring in Kyle Schwarber. Absolutely. That big bat in the middle of the order, bringing him back to Boston, I would love that. This past year, hit 56 home runs, had a 563 on the slugging, a 365 on base, 152 WRC plus. I got to disagree with it, though. I would love it if they found a way to do it. Absolutely. But I think the Phillies are just not going to let him go. I just can't see it. Schwarber has a lot of connections with the city of Philadelphia. He's great within the organization. Great clubhouse guy as well. Lots of relationships there. I just think in the end, he's going to find a way. Dave Dombrowski is going to find a way to keep him in the fold. But it's not just the connections with the city, the clubhouse, the organization. It's also, he's still just very good. Kind of reminds me of Nelson Cruz in a way. A power bat in his 30s that just doesn't seem to wind down. He just keeps getting better and better. I think Schwarber is going to be that moving forward over the next few years. Nelson Cruz, that guy was a monster. I think Kyle Schwarber can absolutely do that. Sean McAdam, Alex Bregman. Listen, I agree, actually. I do think he is going to be the most expensive free agent. I don't think he's going to be the only one, though. But I do think Bregman will come back. I've already given you my reasons multiple times. Not going to go over that again. Now, for Christopher Smith, he says Pete Alonso is going to be the most expensive acquisition. I agree that the Red Sox are going to find a way to bring Alonso into the fold. They need that power bat at Fenway Park from the right side. I think that's a great fit. That's exactly what they need for the middle of the order. But I disagree that he's going to be the most expensive acquisition. Now, with Bregman, I think he's going to end up costing more because he's going to give you the higher wins above replacement. He gives you value both offensively and defensively. With Alonso, he's not really going to give you a whole lot defensively. You can put him out there at first base, but it's not going to be all that great. He's looking like a future DH in the end. So Alonso, he's not going to have a higher WAR than Bregman, and that's what front offices are paying for. They're paying for wins. Sorry to do the Moneyball thing, but that is how it works with the front offices. But I agree. I think Alonso does come to the Red Sox, but I think Bregman is going to be more expensive. Moving on to the second question. Alex Bregman will sign with the Chris Cotillo says the Mariners. Now, I disagree with this. I don't think the Mariners are going to sign Alex Bregman. You got to look at the Mariners historically when it comes to spending. They don't usually spend a whole lot. Now, Josh Naylor, I could see someone like that instead. He's going to be a lot cheaper than Alex Bregman, and he was very good for the Mariners after getting traded there from the deadline. Put up great numbers for them, hit well in the postseason too. And I think the Mariners, if they were to spend money, I think they would rather just keep Naylor around for the long haul. And I think they're eventually going to work something out with him. I think they'll figure out a contract. But for Bregman, he's going to be a lot more expensive. And at that ballpark, listen, I know Bregman has said in the past he can hit anywhere, right? But listen, he's a perfect fit at Fenway Park. The batted ball metrics don't look amazing with Bregman, so that's why I think he needs to stay at Fenway Park. That is just a better fit overall, and obviously all the reasons that I've mentioned, right? Great relationship with the organization over this past year, great relationship in the clubhouse, he changed the culture. Could he go to the Mariners? Could the Mariners, drop a load of cash for the first time in, how long? I don't see it now. So, unfortunately, Chris, I got to disagree with that. Sean McAdam, he thinks the Red Sox. He does say here, there will be interest from the Cubs and Tigers, but ultimately, a 5-year deal keeps him in Boston. I don't see why the Cubs would show interest. Matt Shaw, he showed some good things in the second half. You already got Nico Horner over at second base. Obviously, Dansby at shortstop. They're infield set. I just don't see the Cubs really showing a whole lot of interest. I mean, sure, could you have that DH spot, freed up and you can rotate guys in and out there? Yeah, I mean, you could always do that, but I don't know. I think the Cubs, that was a better fit last year. I don't see that. I could see the Tigers making a phone call. Absolutely. But in the end, I agree with McAdam. He thinks he's going to go back to the Red Sox. Christopher Smith says the Phillies, and I just disagree with this one too. The Phillies, they do need to shake things up there. I agree. They need to do something a little bit different, but they got to find a way to keep Kyle Schwarber in the fold. And I think they got to make moves in other ways. I think they got to get out of the contract from Castellanos. He was not very good this past year. Defensively, he's a liability out in right field. So I think they need to improve the defense out there in right. I think they need to maybe add an arm or two for the bullpen. I just don't see the Phillies dropping another massive contract on Bregman, who is in his 30s now, coming off the quad injury this past year. I think from the Phillies' point of view, that's not a great investment. I think for the Red Sox point of view, because the relationships have already been established and he showed great things at Fenway Park this past year, that makes more sense for the Red Sox moving forward. For the Phillies, I just don't really see it. Sure, could you trade Alec Boehm, get some other pieces back? Absolutely. But you also have to think about this from the Phillies' point of view, too. They got Aiden Miller there, one of the top prospects in the game. He's going to be their next third baseman. And why would you sign Alex Bregman long-term when you got Aiden Miller coming up the pipe? I don't see the Phillies at all, so I disagree with that. Moving on to the third question. Lucas Giolito will sign with the... Chris Cotillo says the Cubs. I think the Cubs could actually be a pretty good home for him. They got a good pitching lab over there. With Giolito, I think the one area he needs to focus on to try and get back to what he was doing the White Sox when he put up a 5-WAR, a 4-WAR there. Now, his fastball did have a lot of success this past year, but when it came to the run value on both the slider and the changeup, not so much. So I think he needs to go somewhere where they can up those secondaries a little bit. I think the Cubs, they could make some sense there. I think the Houston Astros could make a lot of sense. They've done pretty well with pitchers over the last few years, getting more out of them, right? Take a look at what they did with Yusei Kikuchi after the trade deadline. I mean, he looked great for them. Renel Blanco, that guy came out of nowhere. I also wonder about the Nationals. If Giolito isn't able to get a good offer, obviously, Paul Tabani coming from the Red Sox to the Nationals. And if they end up trading Mackenzie Gore, they're going to need some innings. So maybe that could be a good landing spot for Giolito to try and build that value up even more. I could see the Nationals possibly. And hey, he was drafted by the Nationals way back when. Now, McAdam says the Mets. I think that could be a pretty good home as well. Take a look at what they've done with a few guys over the last couple of years. Clay Holmes, they converted him from a reliever to a starter this year. That worked out pretty well. He put up some pretty decent decent numbers. Look at Luis Severino, had a lot of down years with the Yankees. They brought him in. He looked good. They got Sean Manaea turned around. Sure, he had some injuries this past year, but he looked great in 2024. So I think the Mets could be a good landing spot as well. But I think with the Mets, they're going to be looking for top of the rotation kind of guys. I think they're set up really well to go for a trade. I hate to say Joe Ryan, but I think they're going to be in that market. Could they go after Tarek Skubal? It would be a rental for a year, but maybe the Mets do that. So Giolito, I don't think he'll be at the top of the list, but he's a guy that I could see the Mets having their eye on. And Christopher Smith says the Red Sox, again, I just don't think the Red Sox are going to offer him the qualifying offer. They need to spend money elsewhere, so I don't see like a 2 or 3 year deal. He says here, Boston should extend Giolito a 1 year, $22 million qualifying offer, and it makes sense for him to take it after the late season injury. Well, that's another factor as well. Why would the Red Sox, after the injury that he had, and the metrics didn't look great this past year, take the sentimental part out of it, take the emotional part out of it? Why would the Red Sox want to offer that? Again, sure, they built the relationship this past year. He's been with them for the last couple of years now. Unless they feel like that they can help him, get to that next level again, maybe. But I don't know. I just don't see that. Moving on to number 4. Boston's opening day rotation will consist of, Chris Cotillo says, Garrett Crochet, Mackenzie Gore, Brian Bayo, Michael King, Patrick Sandoval, or Cutter Crawford. Now, I find this interesting because he has the Red Sox adding 2 starting pitchers to the rotation. Now, this past weekend in my annual free agent predictions video, I added 1 more prediction for the Red Sox. Now, last week in my predictions episode for the Red Sox, I went with them trading for Joe Ryan and signing Pete Alonso, but I added 1 more with the Red Sox signing Shane Bieber. Now, I've slept on it a little bit. Still not sure quite how I'm feeling about it. I feel like it might be a little too much, but we'll see what ends up happening. But when it came to the Red Sox going after Shane Bieber last offseason, they were very aggressive for him. He ended up going back to Cleveland, of course. That's why they pivoted to Walker Buehler. That didn't work out, obviously. But at the deadline, they were popping up a little bit for Bieber before he went to the Blue Jays. So I wonder if, again, they make another run at him. We'll see what ends up happening. But listen, he's a veteran guy that I think would be a really nice fit behind Garrett Crochet, while also bringing in someone else like Joe Ryan or maybe even Mackenzie Gore. Real quick, for everyone on Nesson, we are out of time, but if you want to see the rest of the show, coming over to Monster Territory on YouTube and see what I got to say. But everybody on Nesson, I'll talk to you next time. Now, the question is, do the Red Sox add 2 starting pitchers to the rotation? Like I said earlier, they got a lot of guys in the fold, right? I mean, you got Peyton Tolley and Connolly Early, who showed a lot of things. You got Patrick Sandoval, Cutter Crawford as well. Don't forget about Kyle Harrison. They just brought him back in the Raffy trade this past year. You got Hunter Dobbins, who will be back at some point, probably in the second half next year, or at least towards the end of the year. Richard Fitz, he's going to be in the mix, if he's healthy and good to go. Luis Perales, so, what's going to happen with him? So, there's a lot of guys here. So I wonder, is 2 going to be too much at the end of the day? Because, listen, if you bring in 2 guys, Crochet would be your number 1. Let's say it ends up being Mackenzie Gore. Yeah, he'd be your number 2. Brian Bayo, he'd be your 3. Michael King, I think you could actually say Michael King would be your number 3 here. Or if it ends up being Bieber, Bieber in this situation, Crochet, Gore, Bieber, and then Bayo would be your 4. And then who's going to be your 5, right? You got 4 or 5 guys looking to win the 5th spot. Peyton Tolley, Connolly Early, Kyle Harrison, Patrick Sandoval, or Cutter Crawford, right? Obviously, there are going to be trades, I think, to be made this offseason. And if they do bring in someone like Mackenzie Gore or Joe Ryan, I do think Early or Tolley are going to be in that conversation. I think one of those guys are going to end up getting dealt, because it's going to help you bring back a more established guy for the top of the rotation. It would hurt to lose one of those guys, but that's what it is at the end of the day. So if you end up making a trade, do you also bring in another guy? Does Brian Bayo end up being your number 4? I wonder. I think this year, sure, he looked great at times, but you go, to what happened in the postseason. Game 2, he couldn't even get out of the 3rd inning. That he kind of looked like a 4 in the rotation at that point. I mean, during the season, yeah, he looked really solid, like a 3, even at times looking like a 2. But you just wonder if the Red Sox really want to maximize this rotation. So do they go after a free agent like Shane Bieber, Michael King, and make a trade? I mean, if you were able to add 2 guys, I mean, what a rotation. Let's say it ends up being Gore or Joe Ryan, one of the trade candidates. Crochet, Gore, Ryan, whoever. And then you also bring in Shane Bieber or Michael King. Brian Bayo's your 4. And then Peyton Tolley or Patrick Sandoval or Cutter Crawford is your 5. I mean, that's a really good rotation. Now, do the Red Sox want to go that far? I don't know. If you go sign someone like Michael King or Shane Bieber, it is going to cost you over $20 million per year. My question is how far are the Red Sox going to go with the payroll? They were over the CBT this past year, so I do expect them to be over it again, but how much are they going to want to go over it? That's one question that I have. You never know. But do they continue to kind of still hold back a little bit? I think they will go a little further, but how much further? They could definitely cut some payroll, right? Nathaniel Lowe, non-tender candidate. That would cut around $13 million off of it. That's his projection for next year. Maybe they get rid of Massa, even if they have to eat half the contract. That takes off close to $10 million. You can shave some payroll off in other little ways too. So I don't know. It's interesting. How far will they be willing to go to upgrade the rotation, especially when they have a lot of in-house options? But if you really want to maximize it for next year, which Breslow has said he wants to maximize this rotation, could you end up going after 2 guys? With Mackenzie Gore, I think he's realistic. The Nationals, Paul Tabani, obviously, knows the Red Sox system very well. I think you could come together on a trade, right? I think that's very possible. And Michael King, I think King's going to go back to the Padres, right? He's been there for the last couple of years. He's had a lot of success there. He had a great 2024. Had some injuries this year, though. He just wasn't able to fully get it going. So I think he ends up just going back and, just restores his value after a good season next year. And then he goes back out to the market again. Again, though, you got a lot of guys in the fold. So I could definitely see one guy through a trade. I definitely think that's going to happen. The question is, will they add another guy that's going to cost you around $20 million, $25 million? We'll see. I think it's more likely they end up just trading for one guy and then they go with all these, in-house options like I've already mentioned and, battling it out for the last couple of spots in the rotation. We'll see. That would be great, though, if they could add 2. That would be great. Sean McAdam, he says Garrett Crochet, Joe Ryan, Brian Bayo, Cutter Crawford, and Patrick Sandoval. Here's the thing, Cutter Crawford, Patrick Sandoval, I think Peyton Tolley will be in that mix. Again, I could see him starting at AAA next year. I could see Connolly Early definitely being in a deal for Joe Ryan. So I think Sean McAdams is a little bit more realistic than Cotillo. I think Cotillo's would be a great ceiling. I would love for that. McAdam feels kind of right there in the middle, like a happy medium, I would say. But he also says here, Peyton Tolley returns to Worcester for additional development time. Again, I could see that. I think that makes sense, especially to continue to work on the secondaries, right? He's going to work to improve those over the offseason, but working on them in-game, that's also different, right? Yeah, sure, spring training. Who knows? Maybe he ends up looking really good in spring training and he can win a spot in the rotation. But I think you could see him go back to Worcester. There's no need to continue rushing him. And then Chris Smith, he says here, Garrett Crochet, Joe Ryan, Brian Bayo, Lucas Giolito, and Cutter Crawford. Again, Lucas Giolito, I don't think he's going to come back. I won't completely write it off, but I feel like it's more likely he goes elsewhere. And then he says Cutter Crawford for the number 5 spot. So I do find it interesting because Patrick Sandoval, I think they're going to give him a chance to win a spot in the rotation. They signed him to a 2-year deal. Right? I mean, it's not like a boatload of money by any means, but, it's a decent amount. So I think they're going to give him a chance to win that 5th spot. If he doesn't, let's say, could he go to the bullpen, right? Could this be, the Red Sox are going to be looking for a lefty for the bullpen. Could he be a guy there? I don't know. But he's had success as a starter in the past. He just ran into injuries, right? And he got the surgery. So I don't know. I think all of these are possible. I would say Sean McAdams is probably the most realistic, I would say. Number 5. The most significant trade addition Craig Breslow will make this winter is, Chris Cotillo says Mackenzie Gore, Sean McAdams says Joe Ryan, Chris Smith says Joe Ryan too. I would say if I were to lean either Joe Ryan or Mackenzie Gore, a part of me wants to think Mackenzie Gore. Again, it depends on what the Nationals want to do. Are they willing to give him up now? Or are they going to be kind of going into this bit of a reset with Tabani in the fold? Or does Tabani kind of take his time evaluating everything? I don't know. I think Mackenzie Gore does make a lot of sense if they're willing to trade him because you have that connection there. Joe Ryan, I've said this before, I just wonder if maybe the Red Sox missed their chance. You know, you're going to be getting other teams into the mix now, the Mets, the Orioles. You know, they're going to be looking for guys, right? The Giants, they could definitely use some more upgrades in the rotation as well. I think Joe Ryan is still very possible for the Red Sox, but I think they had their shot. They had a great chance to do something, and they didn't do it. And I don't know, man. I just always hate opening the door for these other teams. Now, Garrett Crochet, that worked out for the Red Sox in the end. You know, that was a little different. The Red Sox, at the time of the trade, they clearly had the better prospects to give up. This time around, though, teams like the Mets and the Orioles, they got some good prospects too. So it's going to come down to what the preference is. I think the Red Sox have a great chance to get a deal done for Ryan because you can include someone like Tolley or Early in there to lead the way. But you look at the Mets, they got three guys right there, right? Nolan McLean, Jonah Tong, Brandon Sproat. You know, so the Mets, I think, are going to be good competition. We'll see what ends up happening. I don't know. I'm 50-50. I feel like right now I'm leaning a little bit towards Mackenzie Gore. If he's available, that's going to be a big question. Joe Ryan, I could still see it happening. I'm still pretty 50-50 on everything. But everybody, that is it for today's show. I'm going to wrap it up right there. We are officially in the off season, and it's going to be a busy one. We're going to be doing a lot of shows here this coming off season. I'll be doing, recorded episodes. I'll be going live at times as well. So definitely be on the lookout for both. But the most important thing, if you're new, make sure you subscribe down below. You're not going to want to miss anything this coming off season. We got a lot to talk about. It's going to be a lot of fun. But everybody, if you're kind of the way out, hit the like button for me. Again, subscribe if you're new, and I'll talk to you next time.